This is one video in a series which reviews each known Messiah before Jesus of Nazareth. After you watch this video, go to the playlist I made and watch the videos about the other Messiahs. Today we are just going to assess the information we have about Judas ben Hezekiah of Sepphoris in Galilee. This video will not include a comprehensive definition of the word Messiah, its historical uses, cultural connotations, or any case supporting the idea that Judas ben Hezekiah was a Messiah. Nor will it include my reasoning for treating Judas ben Hezekiah of Sepphoris in Galilee and Judas the Galilean, founder of the fourth philosophy, as two different people. I am going to do a video treating each one of those topics in the future, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on that content, because each one of those topics is vitally important and must be understood. But because I want to make these videos very specific and concise, today we are just going to be focusing on the behavior of Judas ben Hezekiah and some adjacent material. So here's a brief outline of what you'll see in this video. First, we're going to talk a little bit about the Judas problem. Scholars don't agree, so we'll talk a little bit about that just briefly, and then we'll go into, secondly, a textual analysis of Josephus. I want to compare the amount of text that Josephus wrote about Jesus of Nazareth versus how much he wrote about Judas ben Hezekiah. So we'll do that secondarily, and then thirdly, we will cover the information from scholars about Judas, give you some of their views. And then fourth, we will dive into the primary source text from Josephus about Judas ben Hezekiah. So if you already watched the video about Judas the Galilean, founder of the fourth philosophy, you'll remember when I spoke about the Judas problem. Last time we spoke about this Judas, and today we are going to be talking about this Judas. Significant challenges arise when attempting to sketch the lives of Judas ben Hezekiah and Judas the Galilean, founder of the fourth philosophy, because Josephus is not abundantly clear if they are the same individual or if they are distinct. Because of this and the fact that nothing remains from Nicholas of Damascus to guide us, scholars vary across the board with regard to their opinions on this matter. In this particular case, Josephus could have helped us all by expounding on the identity of these men, if indeed he was even certain in this regard. It's possible that he wasn't, and that would actually explain his lack of blatant distinction in his works. When the two are understood as separate individuals, the disposition and character of each Judas becomes quite different than if both are understood to be the same person. Before we get into the specific behavior of Judas ben Hezekiah, I want to do a brief comparison of how many words Josephus wrote about him versus how much Josephus wrote about Jesus of Nazareth. Just about everything that you'll hear me say in this Messiah series has been said in some form by someone else previously. However, I do think that this comparison that I do, comparing the amount of words that Josephus wrote about Jesus versus how much he wrote about the Messiah figure of the video, I do believe that comparison is unique. I do believe it is novel. So I kind of want to put that at the beginning of the video since it's my small contribution, my small genuine work. Correct me if I'm wrong though, if someone else has done this, if someone else has done a comparison like this specifically, let me know, because I would like to see that. As always, I assign a very generous word count of 187 to Josephus in his reference to Jesus of Nazareth in Galilee. He really wrote far less than this concerning this Messiah, but for our purposes, we'll assume that Josephus wrote all the words in the Testimonium Flavianum, which he didn't. In contrast, Josephus wrote a total of 173 words about Judas ben Hezekiah of Sepphoris in Galilee. Using this generous comparison, Josephus wrote slightly more about Jesus of Nazareth than he did about Judas. In the future, I am also going to make a video reviewing the historical political situation of Galilee and explain why we find more Jewish revolutionaries coming from that region than other regions in that same time period. Okay, let's get into what the scholars have to say about Judas ben Hezekiah. Firstly, I'll say that Judas was the third Jewish revolutionary circa 4 BCE that we know of who aspired to be king of the Jews soon after King Herod's death. We've already looked at Athronges in Judea and Simon in Perea, and now we see Judas ben Hezekiah rising to power in a different region, Galilee. So we see that the Jewish freedom movement was not a singular organized effort, but rather an ad hoc, fragmented one. And it maintained this characteristic at least through the Jewish-Roman War, which ended circa 70 CE. Richard Horsley wrote an article published in the Catholic Biblical Quarterly in which he says, "The Judas who claimed the kingship in 4 BC, however, was probably a peasant, although as the son of a famous brigand chief, perhaps already recognized as a popular leader." And that's in his article, Popular Messianic Movements Around the Time of Jesus, on page 485 of that Catholic Biblical Quarterly. Martin Hengel, in his book The Zealots, writes, quote, "In Sepphoris, Judas, the son of the robber captain Hezekiah, who had been killed by Herod, had gathered a considerable band of followers around him and had seized hold of the royal armory. In the Jewish war, Josephus is not clear about his aims, but in his Antiquities, he speaks about his enormous ambition and says that his zeal was even directed toward the status of kingship. His armed forces were so powerful that during his march to Jerusalem, Varus had to send quite a large detachment of his army against him from Ptolemais. These troops broke all resistance in Galilee, conquered Sepphoris, and destroyed the city, selling the entire population into slavery. Judas was presumably still able to save his life and go into hiding." So I think that's kind of an inference that Hengel makes in The Zealots, that he was able to save his life and go into hiding. And he also says in the book, quote, "Even in the rabbinic tradition, Judas may perhaps be mentioned as a pious man and a son or disciple of the Torah." And then in the book, he goes on to give this quote from the rabbinic literature in Ecclesiastes Rabbah. And this is the quote from that text. Rabbi Zeira, circa 300 AD, said, "How many pious men and sons of the Torah would have been worthy of being ordained? Like, for example, Judah, the son of Rabbi Hezekiah. About such men, Scripture, Ecclesiastes 1:11, says, 'And also of later things, there will be no remembrance.' But in the messianic future, the Holy One, may he be praised, will ordain an association and have its members sit down beside him in the great community." And that's the end of that excerpt that Hengel gives in his book. But that segment was all from Ecclesiastes Rabbah. And then Hengel proceeds in Zealots to say, "The fact that the text makes good sense without being changed speaks in favor of its referring to Judas. The term of honor, Hasid, probably points to a pious man from the distant past, and the statement leads us to assume that this Judah ben Hezekiah was refused ordination during his lifetime and was therefore not recognized by most teachers of the law. It is also remarkable that there is no other mention in the rabbinic sources of this Judah ben Hezekiah. Certainty is, in any case, not possible." And all that is in The Zealots, page 333, which I highly recommend that you read if you want to fully understand the context surrounding the life of Jesus of Nazareth. William Farmer wrote an article in the journal New Testament Studies in which he explores the genealogical ties to royalty as cause for support of these different Messiah figures in different regions. Regarding Judas ben Hezekiah, he says, quote, "But the case of Judas of Galilee is another matter. Here we have evidence which seems to link his family with the Maccabean royal house," unquote. In the article, he goes on to explain that because King Herod was sentenced to death after he killed Judas's dad, Hezekiah, and because of the potential ties between remnant Maccabean families and the families in the Jerusalem aristocracy. He goes on to say that, quote, "Thus, though it is far from certain, we may with some confidence suggest that the family of Judas of Galilee might well have been related to the royal Maccabean family, and that his claim to the throne, therefore, could have been based upon that relationship." Very interesting thought from Farmer here. And that article is titled Judas, Simon, and Athronges on pages 150 through 151 in the New Testament Studies Journal. All right, now we'll look at the primary source text about Judas ben Hezekiah, which is found only in Josephus. The works Jewish War and Antiquities are the only works in which we find information regarding Judas. The Jewish War was written sometime between 75 to 79 CE, and Antiquities of the Jews was written circa 95 CE. In Jewish War, we read, quote, "At Sepphoris in Galilee, Judas, son of Ezekias, the brigand chief, who in former days infested the country and was subdued by King Herod, raised a considerable body of followers, broke open the royal arsenals, and having armed his companions, attacked the other aspirants to power." That's Jewish War, Book 2, Chapter 4, Verse 1. And in Antiquities of the Jews, the account is as follows, quote, "Then there was Judas, the son of the brigand chief Ezekias, who had been a man of great power and had been captured by Herod only with great difficulty. This Judas got together a large number of desperate men at Sepphoris in Galilee, and there made an assault on the royal palace. And having seized all the arms that were stored there, he armed every single one of his men and made off with all the property that had been seized there. He became an object of terror to all men by plundering those he came across in his desire for great possessions and his ambition for royal rank, a prize that he expected to obtain not through the practice of virtue, but through excessive ill treatment of others." And that is in Antiquities, Book 17, Chapter 10, Verse 5. If you'd like to study this material personally, I have provided a bibliography in the description of this video, which you should check out. It's very valuable.